Well, welcome to the Baker Institute. My name's Ken Medlock. I'm the director of the Center for Energy Studies here, and we're very happy to have our speaker here today, Dr. Woodrow Clark. Co-sponsoring this event is the Kinder Institute and the Center for Energy and Environmental Human Studies. The topic today is something that is growing in importance, and you'll hear a lot of this sort of come out of Dr. Clark's in what he says, because we all are sort of a product of everything we've done in our lives, right? So his career path has sort of led him into a place where he's very well adept at being able to speak on this particular topic. He spent time at Lawrence Livermore after getting his PhD at University of California, Berkeley, and then spent some time in Governor Gray Davis's office, has spent some time in Denmark as a lecturer and was a Fulbright fellow there as well. So very, very sort of colorful history that sort of, I don't want to say culminated, because we never want to be on sort of the downslide of anything, but he was part of the group in 2007 that was involved in the IPCC report that won the Nobel Peace Prize. So that's a very notable accomplishment in his career. But certainly in my conversations with him, it's been very interesting, because in a lot of ways we are on the same page about a lot of things. In particular, how do you actually promote more sustainable, greener energy futures in an economically, not only environmentally, but economically sustainable way. And he's been involved in various tasks trying to figure out how to finance renewable energy deployment, and this has led him to not only some of the work he did with the state of California, but also work he's actually very active in doing right now in China, which I'm sure he's going to talk about a little bit. So, without further ado, I'm going to get off the stage and welcome Woodrow Clark. Thank you.
Let me start off by saying that I'm very proud and honored to be here tonight. I have never been in Houston, except when my plane's been delayed or I had to stay and sleep in the airport overnight. That's the only time. But I also am aware of Rice University and some of its history and background, the Institute in particular, and I'm really happy to be here. I've got a certain time limit, so I'm going to have to go through my kind of presentation and everything in a sort of quickly. So I'm expecting or hoping that those of you who see the last slide, which has my contact information, if you write it down, it'll stay up on the screen for a Q&A at the end. Please write it down, but if you contact me, be sure to say, "Hi, Woody," not "Hi, Dr. Clark," or "Hi, Woodrow." When you do that, it goes into spam, okay? So just so that you know, all right? You have to remember that I consider myself an interpreter. So I'm the kind of person who talks economics here, technology here, and I translate between the two areas, okay? So that's why Woody's important versus Dr. this and all the rest of it, okay? So what I'm hoping to do is actually engage all of you in this dialogue tonight, and you can see there's some speakers or microphones there in the audience. But even more so, I like to walk in the audience. I'm not the kind of person who likes to sit on the stage and just sort of do click, 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 click. I like to engage all of you in what I'm talking about. So I'm hoping to be able to do that and be prepared, because I'm looking to see who's on their iPhone, who's texting who, and at the end of the presentation, I'll give you a quiz. That's my professor hat or whatever, you know. But anyway, what I want to do is also be sure that you all know when I'm joking. I was joking. Okay, all right. Anyway, so I hope you enjoy the talk tonight. And what I'm going to be able to start with is, I hope, is the clicker process here. And I just want to point out a couple of things. One is, yes, this is your city, Houston. And I have to confess that it took me a long time to find a picture of Houston that had a green garden or something in it. So anyone here from the Chamber of Commerce? please get out some pictures of Houston, because I've taken a tour now a couple of times, and this place is beautiful and it's green. And I think that's a real advantage and compliment to all of you. But I do want to say I'm glad to be here. Obviously, here we have Rice University. This book you can all interpret. It says The Green Industrial Revolution. That's Mandarin. No, I just spoke in English, but that's what Mandarin is up there, okay? It came out a year ago in China and is actually kind of highlighted in China's current 13-year, 5-year plan that just came out last March. But in particularly, I do some writing because of this book, and they interviewed me in China in a journal called the Energy Review Journal. They just appointed me to their editorial board, and those of you who are interested in China or Asia, please feel free again. You know, hi, Woody. I'd like to, okay, remember that, all right? So I mention that because this drawing of me that appeared in the journal, I sort of like that. You know, it's kind of nice in a way. Now, I wish they had put my hair in dark color and not so gray. That's the only problem, but aside from that. Then finally, what we'll talk about tonight is smart green cities. This is my current book. It came out in March this year, and I have to say that there's a lot of attention going to this book, and I'm glad that that's happened. I've done about 5 books on sustainable communities, and this one is really doing something that I hadn't seen before. Taking eco or green communities and cities and matching that up with technology and smart communities together. That's what's important. Partly because I think there is a translation problem there that I've encountered over the decades, but also partly because I think it's a very important issue that we all need to talk about. So let me move into the other slides so that we'll get to the end and have some questions as well. By the way, I'm going to go through some of the slides in kind of a, not so much of a rush, but a quick way. I could spend at least 4 or 5 hours talking to all of you about this, getting caught up in the slides. We don't have that much time. So what I'm hoping to do, that we'll hear from some of you and continue this dialogue, all right? So, other books that I've done. Just to mention a few of this is, one is my first book on agile energy systems. I'll get into more details later about that. But I was with the governor's office in California at the turn of the century when we had deregulation in California, and then we had new companies coming, creating energy systems. The deregulation of the central grid and on-site distributed power were being seen as separate. I see them as linked together. Agile, scientific term, means flexible. You have both systems, not one or the other. And there's an advantage to this, both to our communities, to ourselves, and our environment. So I'm actually been asked by Elsevier Press to update this book. It's over a decade old now, and it's now being updated, and we're working on that now. In fact, one of my colleagues, and I know she's here tonight, Melody is way in the back. She's worked with me on translating information into China, and she's an expert on China and energy, and she's here at Rice University where she got her master's degree in science. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is the Green Industrial Revolution came out in English in December 2014. And it's a different book than actually the one that's in Mandarin, but that's a whole other issue, and it's just because they're different things. So moving ahead, I just want you all to know that yes, I'm not just an academic, I'm also a business person. Everyone got that? I know how to add and subtract and make money. It's called making a profit, and it's helping the environment, and it's doing something for our family and friends. So what you're seeing here are just a couple of companies that I'm working with in terms of helping them get started, and also who are involved in basically what I call the green economy, or something that's important for our environment. Just real quick, again, there's a lot of information. This is a company using a cell phone to measure what products are made of in real time on the counter, okay? It's called Earth Accounting. This just shows the schematics of how that works. This is a company that uses on-site generation power through flywheels. A flywheel is a technology that when I was at Lawrence Livermore Lab, we were perfecting, and it's now being used in this company's context. This is a company called HyGen, and it provides energy from renewable sources for hydrogen fuel cell cars. Now, this topic is big, and I can go into a lot of detail, but what I've noticed since I've been here in Houston is that most of you live in your cars, like we do in California. So I'm identifying with all of you, okay? Whether it's an electric car or a hydrogen fuel cell car, you're living in your car, unfortunately, way too long than what you should be, but that's what happens. And so what we're doing is now having hydrogen fuel cell cars introduced in California, and what we need is refueling stations, called the chicken and egg. Which comes first? You have to have both. Same with electric cars and electricity and refueling and recharging cars. This just shows you one of my background things is that I did my PhD at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, in what is called a cross-disciplinary study area. Yes, I have 3 different master's degrees from 3 different universities and 3 different subjects. So when I went to go to UC Berkeley, I took law school. I didn't like it. Anyone here is a lawyer? I apologize. Nobody? Okay, then I'll just tell you, it was boring. Boring. I got tired of it after case study, memorizing things, all right? So I decided I wanted to do that. I do a PhD. And by the way, law has changed, so I know for those of you who are in law know it's changed. But the fact is, I decided to use cross-disciplinary studies, taking my master's degree at one point, which is in anthropology and linguistics, using also political science and economics, and then working together with that and education. So my PhD thesis, which I'm now turning into a book that will be out early next year, stay tuned, ready for this topic? PhD thesis, 25 years ago, violence in public schools. Topical, right? Okay, and unfortunately it is. So that book, or thesis, being updated is coming out. But what happened is when I did it, I was being interviewed a lot in San Francisco, and that got me into the media. Any of you have done a media interview, you know that they talk to you for an hour and they use 20 seconds of it. Not the 20 seconds you would have picked, right? So that's what I decided to, I'll get behind the camera and I'll learn how to be a producer. And that's what I did. And I produced and started a media company in San Francisco on topics that some of you may be related to. I don't know whether you know. I know that the medical city is right next door, right? So some of you may have heard of a guy by the name of Norman Cousins. Oh, come on. No one's heard of Norman Cousins? The Healing Force, a dramatic film that we made. Laughter is good medicine, right? Okay, the body and mind go together, right? Secondly, then I did a series, and then Angie Dickinson hosted some videos of that as well. Then I did a series related to a topic which is very popular today. Ed Asner, the actor, hosted for me, and it was called The Workplace Hustle. Anyone know what that's about? Anyone ever hear of an organization called Fox News? Recently? Sexual harassment. I was the first person, and being a male, I took a real beating about this. I made a documentary about sexual harassment. Ed was the host of that. He and I have been talking since I moved to Los Angeles. We want to do an update of it. It's an important topic. That film documentary 25 years ago was translated into 5 different languages, and I'll now mention the language where it was most important. Who in the 1980s, what country was coming to America? What? Japan. Their executives were harassing American women, and we helped put a stop to it. I used to go to Japan several times in the 1980s, in part talking about this topic. It's now relevant and important today, and those of us in this room who believe in diversity, believe in protecting not only our women, our children, but also other cultures and people, have to be supportive of these kinds of ideas. And what I'm thinking of doing is getting these out again as documentaries are updated. This one is hosted by a gentleman by the name of Elliot Gould. Now, I know this does not apply to any of you, but the film was about baby boomers. No one in this room is that age, right? No one here is over 50, I know, right? I can tell. You're all old, 40s and so. But the point is the baby boomers are getting older, and what was going on? And what we had to do is think about that, and that's why I did that documentary too. So I'm getting these things updated and back in part because I think they're very important topics. Then finally, anyone ever hear of a film called Back to the Future? About, who's that guy? DeLorean, gull-wing car. I mean, even Tesla today has a gull-wing car. It seems like everybody has a gull-wing, this, that, and the other. The point is, what we have seen, and what I'm going to be talking about a little bit, is what's happened to energy in our environment today, and it's related to what Back to the Future was. And Back to the Future, by the way, was 25 years in the future. And when was that? Yes, October last year. We're past Back to the Future. We have to be mindful of what this was getting at then, okay? So, long, short, Shanghai Jews. Anyone in here, I won't go through this. Anyone who's Jewish in this group probably knows that when people were trying to get away from the Nazis in World War II, one of the places they went was China. And where did they go in China? Shanghai. And why? Because the Jewish people had only had the one place in the world to go, and they were actually helped by the Japanese. The Japanese actually controlled the east coast of China, where Shanghai was, and even today, there are 3 Jewish temples in Shanghai. Interesting. Most of you may not have known that, but it's a very important issue in terms of our community and our world and what's going on. So these are things I did as another company that I formed, again, in San Francisco, and I brought it back into Los Angeles, getting it back up. What I want to do now is get into the topic of really concern here, and that's called energy, environment, and what I'll talk about right now is a little bit of getting a prelude to my book called The Green Industrial Revolution. But let's start off with a meeting that happened in Paris last December, where we had all these nations getting together talking about what are we going to do in the future. And in the context of that, the United Nations said we were going to continue to have a group called the G20, and this calendar year, 2016, that was sponsored by China, which I'll get into in a little bit. In the G20, there's also a group called the B20, which has task force, and those groups are advising the G20 about business in particular. I applied for and was selected to be on the financial task force for the B20. So I've been working very closely with following up with what the UN did like 8 or 10 months ago. We just had the meeting of the G20, all these countries, in Hangzhou, China, over Labor Day weekend. And I was just there with the meeting because of my relationship with the B20. So I'll get into some details. It's a very important thing for all of you to know about. And by the way, I have not seen it really covered in the American press, although worldwide it's covered fairly closely. So here we go with Rice University. And another one of the pictures I got of Houston, again, I was just found a little bit of green space land down here, and a little bit of yard area here, and I just again want to show all of you because I'm hoping you'll change some of your pictures about the city. I'm really impressed with what I've seen. And the fact I want to make very importantly now is an economic fact. There are some economists, and all of you probably know who I'm talking about, who say the world is flat. Correct. No, the world is round. We all know that, okay? And one of the things I want to make a point of tonight is that because the world is round, things that we are concerned about here tonight are things that other people are concerned about, have been concerned about, and will be concerned about tomorrow and in the future. And the importance of that is because we need to look at the world as being round, it also has and brings into a different definition of what economics is, which I'll also mention in a minute. So going from that into how this is related, things that happen in one part of the world, whether it's by the ocean or the atmosphere, come into another part. Now I'm going to tell you one of my interesting experiences that just happened was landing here yesterday afternoon, and early this morning, all the rain that you had here in Houston, and even this afternoon. I can only tell you, I wish I had a bucket or two to take back that water to California, okay? We could use it, all right? And if there's anybody in here who's an entrepreneur and has a great business idea and wants to follow up on that, please get hold of me. Talk about the new standard of what green means. No, it's blue in terms of value and money. We are in our 7th year of a drought in California, and that does have an impact also here on Texas and other parts of the United States in different ways. But the point is we have to think about how to solve our problems together. This gets us into what I refer to as the Green Industrial Revolution. We've had a first industrial revolution, it goes back a couple hundred years, a second industrial revolution, okay, and then we had a third one that just recently was talked about by a couple of colleagues of mine, and then of course we had the digital revolution at the turn of the 21st century. Some of my colleagues talk about this just in terms of industrial. I like to refer to it as a green industrial revolution, because we're now going to see, and I'm going to bring up some points about this, as to what's changed, particularly with environment, energy, and economics, all right? The only thing I want to point out here in terms of just of the book is that item number 6 talks about the need for sustainable development, and you'll see here some words that I think all of you will identify with, having to do with science, health, medicine, and other things. In other words, all of this is not just a matter of 1 equals 1, it's a matter of how we define all of these. That's why I refer to myself as a qualitative economist. I want to know what these things are, how we define them, and then what we're going to do about them. And we have to take action. We just can't sort of sit still with all of this, all right? So getting to the details, economics. One of my goals, and I'll say this publicly tonight, I've said it before in other parts of the world, one of my goals is to make economics into a science. I'll repeat that. I don't think I need to. The point I'm trying to make is that if you look into economics, this is a book it came out in 2012 called The Next Economics. If you look into and see The Economist, this was published as a Bible melting in July 2009. Does anybody know what happened 10 months before that in the fall of 2008? I can see you do. You want to make a comment? No? Okay. It's called The Economic Collapse, Global. We had, in other words, an economy around the world that crashed. So what's interesting is that The Economist, the journal, made a great story about all of this in a special issue, because they then talked about economics was a field of study. Not a science, a field of study. Now, if you go online to search for that quote in The Economist online, you will not find the comment is a field of study. They took it out. If you want a copy of it, I have the hard copy of the journal and that line. They took it out. Why? Because people at the Wharton School and the University of Chicago didn't want that in there. And why is it important? Because the economics field did not predict the collapse that happened. Science is predicting. That's why it's qualitative and quantitative. It's not just a matter of numbers, it's a matter of how you define those numbers, those terms, and those words. That is the reason why I did this book called The Next Economics, with some chapters in there by myself and some of my colleagues talking about issues having to do with, let's say, life cycle analysis or externalities. If we're going to measure things, we have to get all the numbers correct and get an understanding of what the depth of them are, okay? Now, taking that one step further, how do we make economics into a science? Ready? Right here. I have filed 2 patents. This is just page 1 of one of them. 2 patents on economics. And those patents talk about how you make economics qualitative and quantitative, and hence a science. As far as I know, and I've given this talk before around the world, there's nobody who filed a patent in economics. I'm the first person to do it. Now, I hope this gets broadcast, because I'll probably get 1,000 emails. Oh yeah, I did this in 2002 or something, whatever. That's fine. The point is to try to get economics into a science, being qualitative and quantitative. And that's one of the things this book does. Talks about the next economics being a science. Now, I have to say, I'm not against numbers. I just want to know the definition and meanings of them. And I go to a great extent to try to find the numbers, but also the words. When someone says to me, for example, and some of you in the audience are probably a part of this, will say, oh, well, I'm in clean energy. What does that mean? I used to work when I was at the Department of Energy in the 1990s with a group that we called ourselves doing clean coal. What does that mean? In English, it's called an oxymoron, all right? Because it's not. You have to do something to define these things, be sure you know what you're talking about, and then be sure it's communicated correctly. But then, there's nothing wrong with talking about it. You just have to be upfront and precise. So this gets into what the next economy and next economics is, and one of them is a circular economy. So what that means is that things don't just happen, if you will, supply, demand, balance, boom, the world is over. Remember, the world's round, it's not flat, so it goes beyond that. And one of them is circular. So I've asked the questions of some of my colleagues here at Rice and also in Houston, and people have been saying about recycling and doing things in that context. Recycling is part of a circular economy. It means things like if you have a purse or you have a backpack or you have a glass of, what are you drinking? No, anyway, if you have whatever you're drinking, whatever you're having, you want to recycle that kind of thing, that kind of product, or where it came from, the bottle or the can. And that's a very important thing. They're doing this now as part of the law in the European Union, in Brussels. They just passed it as part of their approach to what they're doing in Europe. So this is an important aspect of also looking at economics. Related to that is that the green industrial revolution is beginning to see changes. And some of the changes are much more in terms of interest and investment in these kinds of environmental and other areas of energy. Now, I have to say, excuse me, that when people talk about clean energy, they're often talking about natural gas. And that's an issue that we have to deal with, because natural gas is okay on one level, but another level it's a transmission, or it's actually an interim thing to get to other green technologies, and I can go into a lot of detail with that later. But the point of it is we're getting to see more and more funding and financing going into these areas. I was talking to someone before the session started. When I was in the governor's office in California, I was advising our group called CalPERS. It's the investment place for people who are retiring from the system or the state government would actually have their money for retirement. And what we were beginning to do is move away from some areas of investment into other areas, which are now what I call the green industrial revolution. So this is becoming a very, very big issue and a very big opportunity, frankly. So again, if you look at the European Union, they've actually been a leader in the green industrial revolution. I was talking to someone earlier who is from this country right here. It's called Norway. And I used to work and teach in a country called Denmark, right there, called Northern Jutland, Aalborg University. And it was a science technology university, and that's where I learned about some of these things in the 1990s, on-site power, distributed generation, because the Europeans, as well as people in other parts of the Nordic countries, were doing a lot of this. If you look at what they were doing, is also highlighted in one of my books on sustainable communities, where we actually have, this is just one of many diagrams, so this is a plan for a community in Los Angeles. In other words, the idea is not just to say, oh, we have a telephone wire here system we got to replace, or oh, there's a leak in this water valve here. You have to look at the entire area. You also want to be sure you have places for people to ride bikes, and you have parks and places to eat, and you have trees. And this is an important issue. We do not do that as much as we should in Los Angeles. That I notice here that you do a lot of, and you're very conscious of that. And we are, for some reason or other, I don't know why, but in Los Angeles it's not something that's really taken hold in that context. But when you replace these things, if you do it all at one time or modernize them, you're saving money. What I've noticed is people will start doing water replacement here. 2 years later, they got to do, plumbing for the waste here. Whoop, 3 years after that, they got to replace this one for energy systems. No, it's better to do it all at once, integrate those systems, and you save money, and the public will like it. But this kind of patch and repair thing is something we have to be mindful of. So planning is important. That gets to the U.S. Department of Energy looking at something, again, I was talking to a few people before, the whole issue of wind and solar as being intermittent power. That's a key issue. I'm going to get into some more details in a minute. But one of the things I did again in state government in California was get wind and solar put on our CalISO system so that they knew what the timing was for those systems within an hour. That allowed those wind farms and solar farms to get financed and funding. Then that went on to be a tariff system through FERC out of Washington, D.C., the Federal Energy Commission. So what I'm getting at is this is the kind of thing where we have to again see how things are connected and what we have to do to help make them work. This gets back to my first book, Agile Energy Systems. Here's the central power grid. Here it is again, but now we have distributed on-site power from solar, from wind. We have storage devices. We have electric cars here recharging in someone's home. And we have the same sort of thing in offices and buildings. In other words, there have to be both systems that are working together, not independently, but together. They have to be able to not only connect, but also provide support for one another. This is one graph from a PhD student of mine who's from China, and what she has done is diagrammed how this can work in any kind of a community. and city to make the city, as well as connected to other areas, interconnected, smart, but also using green power again. And you can see that illustrated here. This is something that is now going on. Her PhD was done in, I think it was 2009. This is now going on and being implemented in China. So some of this is happening, but I also see some of it in the Nordic countries, Germany in particular, in Europe, and some places in the US, but not that much. This gets into what the Germans did to help finance and make this happen. It's called the Feedin Tariff. Feedin Tariff. What they did was set up a system in 1991 where money would be taken or used from utility power, and then they would be invested in solar and other systems. What they did, though, by the end of that decade, towards the turn of the 21st century, is they increased the amount of the feed-in tariff very steeply. That made Germany. Now remember, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Germany. Germany has a lot of snow, rain, cold weather. But by the year 2006, Germany was the leading country in the world making, producing, and installing solar systems. What? Guess. I think you have a little more sunshine here, don't you? Okay. The point is that this can be done in communities and areas around the world and be done very effectively and economically. And that was part of what the feed-in tariff did in Germany, and it's now been replicated in other countries around the world. This is an example of two cities in Germany under a book that came out a couple years ago called Global Sustainable Communities Handbook. It talks about Freiburg and Hamburg, also, by the way, Potsdam, and looking at the different kinds of ways in which they're defining green cities. Buses, light rail systems. Bicycles. Bicycles? Yes. You don't have to have a car all the time. You can actually have places that are actually dedicated for riding around in a bicycle. And above all, oh my gosh, on top of a roof of a building, you have an actual green area, maybe to sit in the sun if you'd like, or to go out and have a picnic or something. In other words, you're trying to look at what can be done with your own communities and your buildings, okay? That gets into what Germany has also been involved in, which is to get away from using fossil fuels, although they're still somewhat dependent on Russia for natural gas, but they've closed down their nuclear power plants. They are beginning to start closing down their coal facilities in other areas, and their wind turbine systems and all are now offshore in the northern part of Germany, but also just south of Denmark as well. This gets us back to Denmark. Frederikshavn, a town not too far from where I was working in Aalborg, northern Jutland. This is on the east side of the northern Jutland area. And this city, and again as a community, sustainable community, had looked at making itself totally independent by using renewable resources by the year 2015. That was last year. Did they make it? No. They're like 53%, but they're moving in that direction. So instead, what happened, click there. Denmark, as a country, okay, there's only 5.3 million people there, which is about the population of Houston. But the point of it is, they started doing the entire country to be 100% renewable energy by 2050. And then they've looked at how to do it with wind turbines offshore and other kinds of systems throughout the country. Now, I mention this because just 3 days ago, late last week, California signed into law for Governor Brown something very similar, except his goal is by 2030 to have California on renewable energy as a state. We've shut down our nuclear power plants. We're no longer getting power from coal, which used to come from the Four Corners, from coal country area. And so they're pushing this very quickly. It may also mean that soon California will also be having wind turbines offshore. I think some of you are aware of that. That may happen in New Jersey and also in the Cape Cod area of Massachusetts. As we see more and more of this, we can see that there's going to be some major changes. And that's one of the things that California is looking at, and I think also you're probably looking at too in this city, in this community. So this gets me into the idea of how all of this is connected, the smart grid concept. You have to have not only buildings, but communities, but also power systems all connected. Now, I'm going to get into something later which I think and I hope will shock all of you in a positive way. But the fact of the matter is that we have to use technologies, even what I'm using now, or our iPhones or our cell phones or whatever it is. And by the way, I haven't seen anybody texting, so I know you're all paying attention. But we have to use these things in order to get information in a very positive way. You're showing me your cell phone? Were you demonstrating something? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. He had his cell phone up in the back. But my point of all of this is that's how we're communicating today. I don't know how many of you are on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, but I don't like to use it because I don't have the time to start looking at people going to a wedding or at the beach or whatever they're doing. It's fine. Happy New Year, you know, whatever. But I do LinkedIn and I do other kind of social media things, but there's some that we like to do and some, you know, I don't know if anyone does Twitter and all the rest of it. But the world is changing, and in that change, we have to be able to understand it, adjust to it, and be participants in it. Most of us who have children know that our children, I have an 8-year-old son, he knows more about computers and technology than I do. I've been around longer, but for some reason he knows everything from Minecraft to Pokemon and all the rest of it. Did I talk a language? Well, 2 people are laughing. They know what I'm talking about. All right, there may be 2 or 3 more of you that know what I'm talking about. But this is important because the world is changing and the smart grid is part of it, big part of it. So let's take an example of something I've actually done. So this is not just talk, not just a guy writing books and articles, not just a guy who gives lectures. No, I've actually done some of this. This is a community college in Los Angeles College campus. These red areas are where solar systems were put on the campus. I was the energy advisor to the 9 campuses of the LA Community College District for about 7 years. And what I started to do was something, and I'm sure some of you will be very interested in this yourselves or know about it, is said, look, if we have solar systems, we're going to decrease our amount of energy that we're using. We'll depend on the sun or whatever. And where are we going to put them? Well, here's an example. This is a solar system, a whole series of them, put over a parking structure here, and these are the cars parked under it. So when we asked the students after these have been installed, what did you think of this? And they said, oh, this is great. I go out to my car at 3 in the afternoon, and it's cool. It's in the shade. Okay, this is called, you know, you win, it's called externalities. You get that compliment for the fact that you're also generating power by the solar, right? So what you have to do is, again, the smart grid is keeping an information system, having that communicated to the students who will then see it in their classrooms or in the main office of the campus, so that they know what they're doing. And I've actually done this in cities that I've lived in Los Angeles by saying, don't just put the roof on there, let people know in real time what you're doing. So that gets to this. Here is a check from the head of Southern California Edison and his assistant, and that's me. Can you tell? My hair was black then. Just joking, of course. But the point is, this is a check for $2.8 million. In other words, the public utility financed a large part of these solar panels for this particular campus. Meaning, again, agile energy systems. You've got this central grid, Southern California Edison, working with the college campus. This is the opportunity that we all have to think about and take advantage of and do. And this is here, the college president, the person from Edison. And this is an old transmitter system that, of course, they're showing just to show what the old things were 30, 50 years ago. But today we have, of course, this system that is better in terms of a smart community and grid and communication. Here we have an example from Austin, Texas, solar panels on roofs. How many of you have solar panels on your roof? 1, 2. How many of you want to have solar panels on your roof? Okay, now I want you all to sign up for this after the we have a couple of finance groups in this group today. I want you to keep a notice of this, all right? But let me explain to you what I did with the LA Community College District, and then I went further with corporations and companies to do what you're seeing here. If you have one solar system on top of your roof, it costs, and I won't go through the numbers, it costs so much. If you have one on here, their roof, their roof, their roof, you got a whole community. The cost for those solar systems, building by building, is high. When you lump them all together like this as a community or an area in a city, the price can go down. And what I did was work with Paramount Studios in Los Angeles to do that kind of thing for their big studio roofs, to have solar, but then make the price of it low and then offer it to their employees, their subcontractors, and others. Think about that if Rice University did that. Think about it. It could be very interesting, and I'll bet you would get very good prices coming to you when it went out to bid. Because this is the kind of thing that they want to see happen, but it's also the kind of thing I think all of you want to see happen. Plus, it's good for the campus, it's good for the environment, and it's good for your own homes and places that you live and work. So what I'm getting at is there are ways to be able to make this financeable and doable, and just one thing I want to just toss out to everybody. Then when you look at all of this, remember there are things called LED bulbs. Those of you who are economists in this group know that this has happened and is now being reported as disruptive. Because what's happened is the LED bulbs, that which cost more money than a regular light bulb, last longer, can be recycled, but more importantly, if I was to replace the bulbs here, I think these are mostly LED bulbs, aren't they? Yeah. So if I was to replace them, I'd have to get a ladder, have somebody climb up there, the labor costs for it, and all the rest of it. Well, if you have regular light bulbs, like fluorescents, you got to do it every year and a half, maybe 2 years. If you have LED bulbs, they'll go 8 years, maybe 9, before you have to do it. So the cost comes down, and the higher initial cost of the bulbs is really worth it in terms of what it is meaning for your environment and for your community, as well as the building. So what's happened is these LED bulbs have now gotten to really go and skyrocket in terms of their value and their substantial their impact on the environment. And that's what I wanted to emphasize here. It's called disruptive economics, because that's what it's different than the typical business of doing other light bulbs. Major companies are no longer doing the regular bulbs, they're doing LEDs. So now if you look at all of this, energy policy in terms of battery technology, this is one of the other things that takes place, because we have to look at our wind turbines and our solar. How do you store, where do you put the energy that you need for base load? Where is it going to be when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing? Anybody have an answer? Two people, myself and this other gentleman on the side. There's storage, but there's other things too that I'm now going to talk about, because it's also important, I think, for all of you to think about and remember. One of them is that you have financing for the on-site power systems, and that financing allows you to actually say, well, we're going to have this, but we're also going to have storage in our home or our building. Storage could be a battery. There are other systems called fuel cells. There are other ones called flywheels and others that you can have at a home or a building or in a community such as this, several different buildings that provide you the backup technology. In addition to that, remember that if you're getting solar from the sun and you're also having it from home, if these are part of the integrated system, or what I called agile system, you're going to be able to have backup again for the solar that you have in your home, as well as your community also. So that allows you to have the systems to work. I'm getting into some very specific things, more detail in a minute. What about the idea of having circular economics? So also see how these things are related in a very different way. And they're ready? Before the G20 summit happened, I learned about something that I found revolutionary. And what it is the guy who used to head China's state grid wrote a book called Global Energy Interconnection. And what he argued was, and that was actually a theme at this summit, was he argued that what we have to do is have our energy systems interconnected from around the world. So if we're generating solar power, energy, and wind one place, when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, the system's connected so that another part of the world is supplying power because they have sun then. It'd be kind of like now, here we are in Houston, and we're supplying power, because we still got sunshine, to China. The issue is now how to connect all of those things. That's where we're going to get to the smart part in a minute. But the point is, this gentleman did this book. He retired from the state grid in China and has now formed an international organization of global energy interconnection, so that these things are being connected using green technologies, all the way from wind turbines to solar to other things. So that was part of what was discussed at the summit. And then you can see, this, which is one of the things I'm showing you because it's bothered me, is that I saw a report just the other day about how President Obama got off his airplane in Hangzhou at the city near Shanghai, and the president of China ignored him. And that was the only thing I saw published in English about this summit. And does any of you know French? Anyone knows French? Well, one or two people. Okay, I'll say this in French. That was bullshit. All right? That was ridiculous. Because what you had is instead all these countries, including these two guys, the president of the US and president of China, agreeing where there had been perceived as disagreeing for more than a decade or more. The point I'm trying to make is, everybody, we all see the world in the same way today. And because of that, we have certain kind of advantages of things we can do and should be doing, because we're all in the same boat, if you will, okay? So what you had from a result of this summit was one of the things which was talking about how you have a global energy system that's interconnected. Another important thing they talked about at the summit was something that I've actually written about, and I know that they didn't know they were quoting me because they for example, I won't go anyway. Anyway, they used the concept which I've actually written about. It's called civic capitalism. What does that mean? Remember, qualitative, ask the question. Oh, what does it mean? Yes. Civic capitalism means that you have capitalism, market economy, et cetera, but it's not, supply and demand. It's not where government's invisible hand. It's just the opposite. Because if you look at it historically, for the last 100 or even 200 years, government has been involved with our lives all the time. Now, I'm not saying it takes it over. I'm not saying it's in control. But if we didn't have government helping us with land areas and getting railroads and highways and oil and gas, we wouldn't be anywhere today. So the point is, we've had to be in a relationship with having government support. I'm going to give you some examples of that in a minute, but that civic capitalism is where you've got the two together. Now, let me be very clear. That's different than what some people refer to as public-private partnerships. That's a word and concept that when you ask for the definition of it, becomes very difficult. I can give you lots of examples, but let me give you one very important one. Does anybody remember when General Motors went bankrupt? Right? And the American government gave it, I think it was $4.2 billion. Give it. Do you hear that word, give it? Okay. Now, if I was anybody, and I'm sure some of you in this room are investors, if I was an investor, and I put that kind of money, or even $1 million on the table to help somebody out, I would want to be on the board or have representatives from my group on the board of that company or operation to watch what they're doing with the money. We, the American government at that time, didn't do that. Thank goodness that things actually worked out in the end, but I have a lot of questions about that still even today. But that's the kind of thing that civic capitalism could do. In other words, you have people from government helping, but they also have to be there. You just don't walk away from it. I'm not saying that public-private partnerships can't be trusted. I'm just simply saying there's ethics involved, there's oversight involved, and there's accountability involved. And we have to be mindful of that, and that's part of the thing that we all have to do. And just so that you know, that's how my hair got gray. Because I was doing this in public bonds in California and also in the city where I live regarding school district financing. So one of the things that was coming out from the end results of the G20 summit was issues like this. And there is actually a report on this, which I have, I got 5 minutes? Okay. I won't show you the whole report. Anyway, the report's available. It's also available electronically online, and we can probably disseminate it to people if they wanted to see it and read through it. Okay, then that's the report. Okay? In the report are different chapters talking about things that all of you, I think, would be very greatly enthusiastic about. You done taking your picture? Okay. One of them is the Silk Road. The idea of having this in Hangzhou, which is the end of the Silk Road, it came Marco Polo and all the rest of the tying China and EU together. Now, of course, we have a different kind of Silk Road with maglev trains, all right? But going into this further, this is the energy interconnection that I was talking about before. How all of the world being round has all of these things interconnected. This is the concept that I was discussing. This gets into how the systems can be used and how they can be integrated. And then how you look at it in terms of individual buildings, where the buildings are now smart. They're using systems, whether they're LED bulbs or electric stoves or other things, rather than something that's using a fossil fuel of some sort. This gets into, this is some technology by a friend of mine. She's from Inner Mongolia, a scientist at UC Davis, and she's invented a way of distributing and recycling different products in terms of energy. This is some of the other technologies that are available. There's a whole list of things, including systems, the heating, cooling, geothermal. It's not just wind on top of buildings, which I think most of you aren't familiar with, or solar. There's other kinds of systems and energy too. This is from another one of my students who also did his PhD, and he found these kinds of systems on top of all of these roofs in this particular city in China. So they are available, they are being done, and they are there. This is a city in Italy. It's the Piedmont district in Turin, Italy. And you can see they're having solar systems and stuff on top of their buildings and other areas, including some of their buses. This gets into Japan. This is an entire city in Japan, all with solar roofs, right here. An entire city. This was actually a study that was done before Fukushima. And now you can imagine it's just skyrocketed in terms of interest in Japan. This is another example of a company. Anybody ever hear of Google? If you haven't, please see me outside. I have to give you another tutoring lesson. Anyway, this is Google. Google, another chapter in one of my books. These are solar panels covering their parking areas. This is on top of the roofs of their buildings. This is a fuel cell storage area here. These are the two founders of Google recharging one of their electric cars that they give to their employees to use personally. By the way, this down here is a road, but right along here is a train light rail system that goes up and down so people can walk to and from work and also take their bikes, okay? This is a gentleman by the name of Elon Musk. I'm sure some of you have heard of him. I'm going to go through this quickly because I want to show you what's going on. He just brought back a company called Solar City into his company that is making now the Tesla car. He also got a battery company in northern Nevada, okay? Why is that? Does everybody see what this is? This is a company called Honergy. They're in Beijing. These are all solar-powered cars. I went to the inauguration of this July 2nd this year. Yes, over the 4th of July weekend, I was in China. This is me sitting in this AV car, automated vehicle, and this is the steering wheel, but I'm sitting here because I don't have to steer the car. This is their research center. They're in China, and they've got these cars coming to the market. They're starting off with buses, all powered by solar. Oh, by the way, that's why I think Elon Musk bought Solar City and all that back in to do that with it, or Tesla. Okay, so if we go back in history, where did this all come from? Over 100 years ago, hybrid cars. 100 years ago. What happened? I won't go in that too, right? This is more recent. Anyone here have a Prius? Okay, it has what is called regenerative braking. Guess what? That regenerative braking was invented at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. I was there when we tried to get the license by Ford, GM, and Chrysler in Detroit. They all said no. Toyota was waiting for us down the hallway and said, oh, we'll take it. And they licensed it. Now, Toyota's the #1 car company in the world. Anyway, long story short. Okay, so now you have hydrogen fuel cell cars. These are all coming to the market. These are refueling stations. This is getting the hydrogen, electrolyzing it from solar. This is how these things can be combined. So we have on-site power and storage, as well as using solar and wind, but also hydrogen and other kind of systems. This shows how the world is going to be looking at this in a circular economy, but also in transportation and mobility, okay? And then this is a diagram of what I consider to be where we're going. And I was recommending this to some of my colleagues here before. You've got great highways here. What if you put solar panels along the highways? Generating power for your electric cars that you may have. And guess what? She's not even steering the car. Okay? You also have wind turbines and other things close by as well. Remember, these areas by highways are already approved by environmental regulations, so they're available immediately. So finally, I just want to leave you one last thought, and we'll have some Q&A, I hope for a few minutes anyway. This is my son, and this is also my son. They see each other as brothers. Here they are, the two boys, learning how to use an old typewriter. By the way, this is before my time, just so you know. But the point is, they're bonding. This is also my son teaching his nephew, my grandson. And these are hydrogen fuel cell toy cars that they're learning how to use. My son actually entered it in a science fair. He didn't win, but he entered it. And this is under the roof of that, which is an electric hydrogen fuel cell. So with that, let me take some Q&A. Thank you, everybody.
So if anybody has any questions, I invite you to come to the mics in the aisle.
Hi, Woody.
It didn't go into spam. You noticed that, right?
First, if you want to see how green Houston is, get on Google Earth, and I think you'll see a different picture than the downtown pictures. Inherent in the idea of sustainability is a capacity to endure, and you've emphasized how economics is really the way that happens. And we see in our energy portfolio new techniques and technologies replacing traditional ones. Given its current underpopulation and the projection for growth, it seems like Africa is going to be the laboratory in this century for how things progress as opposed to the progressive displacement in the developing world. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's interesting you say that because that's come up before. My background is an anthropologist, and I've done most of my work in South America, but also a bit in Africa. And the state grid that I mentioned before in China, the guy who is retired and did that book and now heads this organization is actually focused on Africa, because he sees wind and sun as being a powerful means of creating energy coming from Africa. And what they're hoping to do is be able to get those systems installed and then supplying power for other parts of the world. They also saw something which I had been aware of but didn't really think about, but the G20 summit brought it up. You have the same opportunity, let's say, in eastern Russia, Siberia, and also western China, Mongolia and areas like that. And that's where I see the kind of connectivity that allows the world to be interconnected that way. So I think you're right. I think we're going to see a lot of development in China, particularly, in Africa, but it's going to also impact the rest of the world, and it's coming immediately, frankly. Yeah. There's another phone, microphone you want.
Do I have to walk all the way over there?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Very good, insightful dissertation. First of all, 2 points, an admonition and a question. My admonition, science is not about predicting. Science is about discovery, both qualitatively and quantitatively. And my question is sort of an Achilles heel question. And what I see as the Achilles heel of this our present situation is the grid. And it's a sort of a tug-of-war between grid capacity and storage, that is intermittent productivity versus storage, because, if you get a spike, you're going to blow the grid. And I wonder how much thought there has been into that and how that translates into the grid as a whole, as a national thing, or maybe a regional thing, or maybe getting into microgrids, and then getting into personal storage for houses and spaces. And I wonder if you have any idea of how that has evolved and how that integrates into. I know that's a kind of a broad question, but that's my question.
How much time have we got? Let me just real quickly. Your comment regarding the science, I totally agree about that.
Not productivity, it's about discovery.
Right,
yes.
but anyway, that's important. But the other question about storage is there's a lot of discussion about that. I just wrote an article for the Energy Review Journal that's being translated into Mandarin about just that issue. What I'm trying to do is get that journal and those articles that are in Mandarin also now into English. Now, I wrote it in English, so it's available. So if you want to send me an email, I can send you the article I wrote. But my answer to the question is very simple, and that is this is a major issue, but one of the things we've got to do is integrate the systems. So there, for example, east of where I live in Los Angeles, a place called Palm Springs, we have a lot of wind turbines. The wind usually blows there around 3 o'clock in the afternoon to about 4 the next morning, almost every day. But during the day, we have a lot of sunshine in that region. So one of the things I did is say, let's have those solar systems along the same rows in between the wind turbine rows. So you have the sun during the day and the wind in the afternoon and evening. So we have to be able to integrate these systems, provide supply in terms of backup as well, but also be sure that we're prepared for times of disaster. That's why I mentioned the flywheel and other technologies and fuel cells and others that can be on-site power systems for storage.
Solid state storage?
What?
Solid state storage, perovskite.
There's all kinds of, yeah. Right.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, right. We got to get them together. Yeah.
Hi, Woody. Thank you for your presentation, very interesting. Would you like to make a comment? I didn't hear anything about hybrid production systems, electricity production systems or generation systems, both in the microgrid and microgrid. They're becoming very important in the transition strategies, energy transition strategies. And by hybrids, I mean, for example, the use of natural gas to compensate for the intermittency. One thing, by the way, that we should be proud in Texas is that Texas is the #1 place for wind farms. Yeah. California, you know, the green state. Texas has more than double the wind capacity of California. There's many reasons for that, but one of them is because of the new generations of gas turbines and the amount of gas that exists in Texas that allows to compensate for the intermittency, and that has surprisingly support the growth of the wind farms in Texas. The same thing is happening also in the microgrids. Do you want to make a comment on
well,
that's your thoughts about it?
Yeah, that's one of my purposes of talking about agile systems. In other words, where they can be integrated and together, and the systems can be a variety of different things. But the concept of hybrid is extremely important, and that's why I pointed out about the Toyota Prius and the regenerative braking. If you take that same concept to the maglev train that I was showing earlier, that was another technology developed at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. I was there, and there were no train makers in America. So what we did is license it to Siemens Corporation in Germany, and they started making the trains with some of their colleagues out of Europe. So what we've got to do in this country is see where the opportunities are for both business and development in these kinds of technologies, because they are available, and like you say, they're also commercially viable, and they're very good in terms of operating systems and integrating them. So I agree totally.
Real quickly, I see the lines are starting to grow. We're actually constrained on time, so I'll allow one more question, and then I invite you to actually talk to Woody after the talk.
Be sure it's Woody. Woody.
Yeah, okay. Hi, Woody. Yeah. Notice that solar roofs became very popular in Hawaii, Arizona, Nevada, California, because of the net metering. In fact, these things grew very rapidly, and what we found is it seems a very hostile response. This created tremendous conflict. Hawaii, now I understand, has terminated their net metering program. Nevada virtually ran them out of the state. Arizona's doing very similar kind of problem. California, at least, looked at this pretty seriously, and I understand they capped it at 5%. Right. So it seems like something's really gone wrong here. This wasn't properly planned. And I know in Hawaii, they're literally running the grid backwards. I mean, they overloaded it. So it seems to me that everybody jumped on this, but there was no planning, and now it's created a tremendous amount of friction. In fact, I think the Hawaii Electric Company is now virtually bankrupt. And so how do we get it right?
Well, that's one reason why, and I noticed my colleague Melody is in line to ask a question, but I just want to point her out to all of you. She's from China, and she works with me on energy and environmental issues, okay? But that's one of the reasons I mentioned China, because China does have plans and does things. And so I get very, very... What? Oh, I'm back on. Okay, I thought maybe cut. Remember, I'm in the media. I know how to do it. Okay, cut. Okay. Anyway, and the answer to the question is I get very concerned about all these policy things that go back and forth in our different states. And as a nation, we're also not really united in that context as well. And that's the thing that we need. And I'm not going to get into politics, okay? All right? But my point is that I do think we need to take advantage of and see the opportunities from other countries and other parts of the world. That's why I'm telling all of you, this G20 summit was shockingly progressive. I use the word progressive not just as liberal, progressive. They were really moving in this green industrial revolution in smart green cities. This is the kind of thing that we need to see and have to line up and work with. That means collaboration with China, with Europe, with other parts of the world, including Africa, in terms of what they're trying to do with energy systems as well. That's what we have to do.
Everybody please join me in thanking.
Thank you.